have a briefing with the authorized advisor to the president on barrierless environment, Tetyana Lomakina. With Tetyana, we will discuss organization and functioning of humanitarian corridors. At 2 p.m., we will have a meeting with the authorized advisor to the President of Ukraine on rights of child, on children's rehabilitation, Dar'ya Gerasimchuk. Subject of our briefing will be evacuation of children and women, adoption process during the wartime, as well as procedures for crossing the border with children. At 2:45 p.m., Speaker of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Alexander Tetyana, will join us and he'll tell us about the current situation on the front lines. And at 3:30, we'll have the Minister of Health of Ukraine, Viktor Leshko, with us, and we will discuss with him the operation of health facilities and healthcare system as such during the wartime. So, Tetyana, we can hear you, we can see you, you're welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start with something important. Why is it so important for Ukraine now to have those humanitarian corridors? Mariupol, Sumy, Izum, Enerhodar, Kyiv province, Luhansk province. It's first of all about people. People now living in those areas of active combat action. Unfortunately, now we see that Russian military destroys buildings where people try to hide and their values and their culture, bombing of city infrastructure with people, shelling against innocent civilians, is to threaten people to break their will to resistance and to request capitulation against Russian invaders. We have already heard it in Mariupol, and I think you have already heard it as the request from Russia. In Zaporizhia, Ukraine has sent 26 buses in order to take people from Mariupol who have walked to the village of Lomakina and get them to Berdyansk. And we hope that the Russian military will allow them to get through that humanitarian corridor in those humanitarian buses, and also that they will let the private cars through. We request that the Russian military should stop shooting and let people go through. So we have to open humanitarian corridors in order to bring supplies, bring aid to those cities, and bring people to big Ukraine. Even though Russian military has broken agreements many times, due to persistent international negotiations, good teamwork of evacuation team on site, heroism of drivers, those from the State Emergency Service, medics, and people from the Ukrainian Red Cross Society managed to get almost 200,000 people out of those hot areas. Women, children, disabled people, elder people. Now humanitarian corridors, those routes are opening in various directions because there are more than 80 towns and villages under siege, and their evacuation, urgent evacuation and humanitarian aid is required. Yeah, now we are seeing systematic violations of arrangements by the Russian military. We see situations where they stop evacuation routes with tanks, they place mines on those routes of convoys, or they are bombing cities when there is an arrangement for ceasefire and people would have to board those buses in those cities. But I have to say that there's nothing new. The whole world has seen it in Georgia, in Ukraine, in Crimea, in Donbass in 2014. Unfortunately, at that time, the global community did not respond in such a strict way to force Russia to stop. Unfortunately, now it results in a situation where, for the third week running, Russian military tries to completely destroy beautiful city of Mariupol. And no sanctions, no international sanctions for violating the rules and order don't stop it. But we cannot stop. We cannot stop for any 1 minute in our efforts to organize humanitarian efforts. If you don't act, it will result in losses among innocent civilians because of they will be frozen, they're lacking water, they're wounded, injured by fragments and so on. And those saved lives are worth trying every now and again and again, opening those humanitarian corridors and providing humanitarian aid. In those areas under shelling, people are hiding now in basements, in shelters, and there are various conditions depending on a particular town or village. In cities of Kyiv and Kharkiv, a lot of people have been hiding in metro, in subway. Some of them spend time reading news, some of them play with their children, some of them try to think. But there are cities where there is humanitarian catastrophe, and it's very difficult there. People are sleeping while standing there because they are looking for a place to place their children to lay down. And in cities like Mariupol, there is no food, water, no mobile communication, and people are on the edge of survival. As the witnesses say, they can only survive because friends, neighbors, relatives help each other. They use open fire to cook, they take water from melted snow or from streams, or get water from heating systems. They use gas lamps, they sleep on cold floors, and we see that there are mass-scale diseases there. There are no medicines, and there is terrible suffering, and people cannot go outside because of shelling and bombing. And we apply to the global community to make a no-fly zone above Ukraine, to deploy air defense systems to defend people. We ask you to voice your requests for humanitarian corridors. We see every day that there are many humanitarian corridors being discussed, but as I already said, we are seeing numerous violations. Why does it happen that way? Recently, the International Red Cross published on social networks saying that there are rules even during the wartime, the rules of war. According to international humanitarian law, parties have to agree upon ways to evacuate innocent civilians, to provide humanitarian supplies, and there would be a ceasefire, and no new territories should be taken during those periods. And such agreements are being made using International Red Cross Committee as intermediary or other international organizations, and everything is coordinated in every detail. All fine nuances are discussed, like the precise route of that convoy, and it's prohibited to leave that route, the number of buses, their nameplates, description of checkpoints, roadblocks, description of humanitarian supplies, rules according to which private cars can join the convoy, a list of people to be evacuated. After that, the parties have to publicly announce that humanitarian corridor is open. What we are seeing for the third week running, we see systematic violations of that order. The International Red Cross Committee has to become the intermediary, and when working in the combat areas, they can use their status to open some opportunities for those humanitarian corridors to work in a safe way. However, in the real world, Russia completely casts doubts on all those arrangements. We see it with this example of humanitarian corridors agreed upon. It's also important, and the International Red Cross and Crescent Committee recognizes that we see a huge need for more active involvement of the International Red Cross Committee, United Nations, UNICEF, those international partners who have been mandated to deploy humanitarian missions in Ukraine, and they have to make efforts jointly with the international community to force Russian leadership into compliance with international humanitarian law. Recently, the president of International Red Cross Committee, Peter Maurer, visited Kyiv, and we do hope that the promises he gave to deploy activities in places which need urgent help, that all those promises and arrangements will be complied with, and authorized representatives of RCC will be accompanying our humanitarian convoys. We know that currently people worldwide send millions of dollars to Red Cross to help Ukraine because they trust the International Red Cross. So we do hope, really hope, that it will all start working. Also, I'd like to mention that currently, as you already heard, the Pope of Rome called to provide humanitarian corridors in Ukraine. The President of Finland, while talking to Vladimir Putin emphasized the need to evacuate peaceful civilians through humanitarian corridors. Every public appeal is important, especially on such high level. It's important about drawing attention to those cities and towns which currently need our urgent help. It makes people again and again discuss the need for humanitarian corridors to put pressure on Russia. At the same time, it's a message for those residing in those siege cities and towns. We remember you, we'll come there to help you. So we thank very much all those global leaders, spiritual leaders, for their huge support. What about the effectiveness of such appeals to Russia? Unfortunately, there are very few leaders, I think, listened to by the Russian Federation, but we should not stop. Thank you, Tetyana. Dear journalists, are there any questions? Please take the microphone.
Здравствуйте, Виктор Мельников.
Hello, I'm Victor Melnikov, special reporter for CGTN.
Вот вы говорили о
You
том, что
said
есть нарушения
that there are violations in those non-compliance with those humanitarian corridors by Russia. Could you please clarify does that humanitarian corridor or those humanitarian corridors, do they operate better or worse in the recent days, and if so, then why? Well, I would say that the situation differs between different regions. Looking at city of Mariupol, there it needs humanitarian corridor to that city to get wounded people from there, to get elder people, disabled people, women and children out of there. No one time have we been able to do it. So it's announced that there will be a corridor, but evacuation buses cannot come any further than the city of Berdyansk. With regard to other areas, other directions, then indeed we have different sorts of situations. There are opportunities, and in some places humanitarian corridors work, and in those places we indeed evacuate people. It works in the Kyiv province. We are also able to do something in Luhansk province, but even in those directions from time to time we have some non-compliance, some violations when there is a convoy with humanitarian supplies and it's forced to make a U-turn or it is stopped by Russian Federation under some unclear circumstances. I have to say that we record all those violations and submit them for negotiations. Also, one more question about Kyiv province. Today, it's expected that people will be evacuated from Kazarovich. That's a village near Demidov. The situation is very difficult there, and everybody recognizes it. Also, the Kyiv police of the Kyiv province recognizes that there is a very difficult situation. I know that there is a flood by Irpin River, which makes it even more difficult for people to access those points where they should gather for evacuation. So how will that problem of Demidov be resolved? When and how it will be possible to evacuate people from there? I have to check. Because now corridors are open in many areas. I'm talking about towns and cities. Could you please tell us again what is it? Kazarovich village in Kyiv province. Today there is a humanitarian corridor. Velika Demirka, Kazarovich, yes, Kazarovich is here. From the village of Kazarovich, the gathering point is the National Police Training Center, and evacuation buses will be sent from city of Vyshgorod. So today we will make an attempt to help people to evacuate. Yes, but I'm talking about Demidov. In Demidov, it's said that the situation is particularly difficult there. And Demidov is right here, right there, near Kazarovich, and not far from Kazarovich. Let me mark it here. Demidov, yes. If you provide me with your contact date after the press conference, I will be able to learn about the situation in more detail and will contact you. Thank you. Okay, one additional question is this. I have been told... Sorry, just a moment. I spoke with the press unit of the Kyiv provincial police, and they told me that they cooperate with the Red Cross and with some volunteer groups, I think volunteer teams. But
адресный подбор людей не осуществляется. Есть
Targeted
только определенные точки
targeted
сбора
identification of
людей.
people is not carried
Как
out. There are just some
людям
gathering
сейчас
points
без
identified.
связи,
So what should those people do who
добраться
have no
до этих
communications?
мест?
How they should get to those gathering points? Yeah, I see how to learn about them. Yes, indeed, we know that now there are big communications problems with communications in those villages and towns. That's why the State Emergency Service sends out text messages every morning. We know that text messages do reach people, and due to those text messages, people come to those gathering points. They learn about those gathering points and then can evacuate. Separate question is the local authorities' ability to help those people who cannot leave their homes on their own in some situations. So some very old people, for example, or some disabled people, or parents who have many children. That is important, and it depends a lot on the community's ability to join their efforts, but Ukraine makes every effort to help them. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Good afternoon. Оксана Бауліна,
Добрий день, я Оксана Бауліна з видання Insider. The Insider. Я хотіла б задати питання, от яке, мабуть, найскладніша ситуація в Маріуполі в зв'язку з тими людьми, яких російські війська змушують виїжджати не в Західну Україну, але виїжджати в так звані ДНР та ЛНР. Чи ви знаєте точні кількості людей, яких змусили, яких викрали, скажімо, чи яких змусили, чи як би ми це не назвали, змусили туди слідувати?
Вам потрібна допомога, пані Тетяно? Чи ви почули?
I would like to say that now people who have witnessed such crimes, they call us on the phone, they tell us about those, and based on their testimonies, we can say that, for example, they testified that there was a shelter in Tarasport in Mariupol. There were more than 4,000 people, including women, children, elder people, and there was that forced evacuation from those premises, from Tarasport. Also, we know of such cases in some villages near Mariupol, but now we cannot support, we cannot know the exact numbers of those people, because now the Ukrainian law enforcement works on those cases. We have testimonies not only from witnesses but also from those who meet residents of Mariupol in trains going through Russia in various directions, and they just want to tell that they see that people are brought somewhere. Also, we also have some calls from those victims, from those people. They try to call their relatives and to get out of Russia whenever possible. So indeed, today there are gross violations, cases of gross violations of human rights. Currently, we have also been recording all those facts and will investigate them. Any more questions?
Питань більше
No
немає.
more questions. Okay, thank you very much, Tetyana, for joining us. And I'd like to remind you that our next briefing will be held at 2 p.m. So you're welcome to join us. See you.